You are 24 years old, and you are about to make a decision that most people your age will never make. Not because they can't, not because the information isn't available, but because the decision requires you to think in a way that everything around you is actively working against. Your friends are optimizing for the weekend. The algorithm is optimizing for your attention. Your employer is optimizing for your output. Nobody in your immediate environment is optimizing for your financial future except you. And most days, even you aren't doing it well enough. This is where the 1% begins. Not with a trust fund, not with a tip from a hedge fund manager, not with some private knowledge hidden behind a velvet rope that nobody outside a certain tax bracket can access. It begins with a single, unglamorous, deeply uncomfortable shift in how you relate to money, time, and delayed reward. It begins before the first dollar is invested. It begins in the mind, and the mind is the hardest asset to develop because there is no app for it and no shortcut through it. This is what it actually looks like to invest like the top 1% in your 20s. Not the highlight reel, but the full picture. The first difference: they define wealth before they pursue it. Most people in their 20s are chasing a feeling. They want to feel secure. They want to feel free. They want to feel like they've made it. The feeling is real, but it's not a strategy. And when you chase a feeling without defining it, you make financial decisions that serve the emotion rather than the outcome. You buy the car that makes you feel successful. You take the trip that makes you feel free. You avoid looking at your account balance because the number makes you feel behind, and the feeling is unbearable, so you just don't look. The top 1%, especially the ones who started with nothing, do something different before any of this. They define what wealth actually means to them in concrete terms. Not "I want to be rich." Rich is a feeling. Not "I want financial freedom." Freedom is a concept. They say, "I want $4,000 a month in passive income by the time I'm 38. I want to own 3 income-producing assets before I'm 35. I want a net worth of $500,000 before I turn 40. They assign numbers. They assign timelines. They make the feeling into a target, and then they reverse engineer the target into a set of daily behaviors. This sounds simple, but it is not practiced. Walk up to 10 people your age and ask them to define their financial goal in specific numbers, with a specific timeline, and watch what happens. Most will give you a range. Most will hedge. Most will say something like, "I just want to be comfortable," and comfort is not a number, and you cannot build a strategy around comfort. You can only drift toward it and hope. You stop drifting at 24. You write the number down. You put it somewhere you can see it. Not for motivation, but for accuracy. The number is not an inspiration, it is a coordinate, and you cannot navigate to a coordinate you haven't set. The second difference: they understand the difference between earning and building. Here is something the school system does not teach, and most employers would prefer you never fully understand. Your salary is not wealth. Your salary is a recurring transaction. Every 2 weeks, your employer transfers money into your account in exchange for your time and your output. And the moment that transaction stops, for any reason, the income stops with it. You are not building anything with a salary alone. You are converting time into money at a fixed rate, and then spending the money, and then converting more time. The cycle has no exit unless you interrupt it. The top 1% in their 20s understand this not as a concept but as a physical reality that governs their decisions. They take the salary, but they do not confuse the salary with the goal. The salary is fuel. The goal is to build something that runs on a different engine entirely, something that produces income independently of your hours, your presence, and your energy. An index fund that compounds while you sleep. A rental property that collects rent while you're at your day job. A business that generates revenue while you're on vacation. An asset that earns while you're not earning. The shift from earner to builder does not happen overnight, and it does not happen without sacrifice. In your 20s, it looks like this. You earn $58,000 a year, and you live like you earn $42,000. The difference, roughly $1,300 a month, goes directly into building, into the brokerage account, into the down payment fund, into the side project that doesn't make money yet, but will. You do this for 3 years. You do not upgrade your apartment when the raise comes. You do not buy the car that your salary now technically supports. You route the difference into the machine, you let the machine grow, and you do not touch it. This is not deprivation. This is arbitrage. You are arbitraging your present lifestyle against your future position, and the return on that arbitrage, compounded over a decade, is the gap between the person who retires at 65 with enough and the person who achieves financial independence at 43 with more than enough. The gap is not talent. The gap is not luck. The gap is one decision made consistently for 10 years while everyone else made a different one. The third difference: they invest in assets, not aesthetics. You know the difference between an asset and a liability intellectually. An asset puts money in your pocket, a liability takes money out. Robert Kiyosaki wrote it down in 1997, and 32 million people bought the book, and yet most of them still drive depreciating cars and carry credit card balances. And call their house an investment, because understanding a concept and changing your behavior around that concept are two entirely different cognitive events separated by an enormous amount of friction. The top 1% in their 20s close that gap. They make the concept behavioral. They look at every significant purchase through a single filter. Does this produce a return, or does it produce a feeling? Both are real, both have a place, but they are not equal, and they are not interchangeable. And the person who treats them as interchangeable will spend their 20s acquiring things that feel like wealth, and their 30s realizing they built nothing. What does investing in assets look like practically at 24, at 26, at 28? It looks like opening a Roth IRA before you open a car loan. It looks like putting $500 into an index fund in a month, where you also wanted to spend $500 on something that would have made you look more successful to people who aren't paying your bills. It looks like researching what a duplex costs in your city instead of researching what a new apartment in the better neighborhood costs. It looks like starting the side project that has a revenue model instead of the side project that has an aesthetic. None of this is glamorous. The asset-building version of your 20s does not photograph well. It does not generate interesting content. It does not make you the most interesting person at the dinner party because the most interesting thing you did this month was increase your brokerage contribution by $200. And that is not a story anyone wants to hear over food. The person at the table with the most interesting stories often has the least interesting portfolio. You understand this. You make your peace with it. You build quietly, and you do not perform the building. The fourth difference, they treat risk as a skill, not a personality trait. Most people treat risk tolerance as something fixed, something you either have or you don't. You are either a risk taker or you are conservative, and those categories feel like identity, and identity is hard to renegotiate. The person who says I'm not a risk taker uses that sentence to justify keeping $40,000 in a savings account, earning 0.4%, while inflation removes 3% of its purchasing power annually. They are not avoiding risk. They are choosing a slower and quieter risk over a more visible one, and calling it safety. The top 1% understand that risk is not a personality trait. It is a skill. It is something you develop through knowledge, through experience, through the deliberate process of making small bets, absorbing the outcomes, updating your model, and making larger bets as your understanding grows. They do not eliminate risk. They develop a more sophisticated relationship with it. They learn to distinguish between risks that are worth sitting with and risks that are simply reckless dressed up as bold. In your 20s, this looks like starting with what you understand. You don't invest in cryptocurrency because someone in a group chat made 400% on it. You invest in a broad index fund because you understand what it is, what it owns, what drives its returns, and what its historical behavior looks like across multiple market cycles. Then you add a layer. You learn about real estate. You study one market, one asset class, one deal structure until you understand it well enough to evaluate it without emotion. Then you consider your first property. You don't start with a 12-unit apartment building you found on a podcast. You start with a duplex you can manage. You build the skill of risk in proportion to the knowledge that makes that risk intelligent. The person who invests in everything they don't understand because they're afraid of missing out is not a risk taker. They are a gambler. The person who invests in nothing because they're afraid of losing is not conservative. They are losing slowly. The 1% are neither. They are learners who convert knowledge into calibrated action, and the calibration improves every year because the learning never stops. The fifth difference, they use debt as a tool, not a trap. Consumer debt is a trap. A mortgage on a cash-flowing property is a tool. A car loan is a trap. A business loan that funds a revenue-generating operation is a tool. Credit card debt carried month to month is a trap. A line of credit used to bridge a short-term gap in a real estate deal and repaid within 90 days is a tool. The difference between the trap and the tool is not the debt itself. It is whether the debt produces a return greater than its cost. The top 1% in their 20s learn this distinction early, and they apply it ruthlessly. They are not afraid of debt in the abstract. They are precise about which debt they carry and why. They will take on $200,000 in mortgage debt on a property that cash flows positively after all expenses, because that debt is working for them. The bank is their partner, funding 80% of an asset while they capture 100% of the appreciation. They will not carry a $4,000 credit card balance at 22% interest to fund a lifestyle their income does not yet support, because that debt is working against them, and the mathematics of it are not subtle. What this looks like practically. You graduate without credit card debt because you treated your credit card like a debit card. Every charge is cleared by the end of the month. No exceptions. No carrying a balance because the month got away from you. Your credit score at 24 is 740 because you were disciplined about something small. And the reward for that discipline is access to better rates on the larger debt you will eventually use strategically. A good credit score is not the goal. It is the access that the good credit score provides. It unlocks better mortgage rates, better business financing, and better terms on the tools that will compound in your favor. You think about debt the way the 1% think about debt. Not with fear and not with casualness, but with precision. The sixth difference, they protect the downside before they chase the upside. The 1% are not more aggressive than everyone else. They are more protected. The aggression is visible. The protection is not. What you see is the bold investment, the big position, and the deal that returned 40%. What you don't see is the emergency fund that meant they never had to sell that position at the wrong time. You don't see the insurance structure that meant a single bad event didn't unwind a decade of building. You don't see the diversification that meant one bad bet didn't take everything down with it. In your 20s, this principle is unglamorous but foundational. Before you invest aggressively, you build a floor, 3 to 6 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account that you do not touch and do not count as part of your investment portfolio. It is not an investment, it is infrastructure. It is the thing that keeps you from making a panic decision in a bad month that destroys a good decade. It is the thing that lets you hold through the market correction when everyone else is selling, because you are not selling from fear, you are holding from security. The 1% in their 20s also protect their income. They invest in their skills with the same seriousness that they invest in their portfolio, because their earning capacity is the largest asset in their 20s. And an injury to that asset is the single biggest financial risk they carry. They maintain their health. They build redundant income streams before they need them. They don't wait until they're laid off to realize that a single income source is a single point of failure. They build the second stream while the first is still running. This is not pessimism. It is engineering. You build the bridge to hold more than the expected load, because bridges that are built to exact specifications fail exactly when you need them most. The seventh difference: they play a different game than the people around them. This is the hardest one, not intellectually, emotionally. When you invest like the top 1% in your 20s, you are playing a game that most people around you are not playing. And because they are not playing it, they cannot see it. And because they cannot see it, they will sometimes, often without meaning to, apply pressure that pulls you back toward the game everyone else is playing. The lifestyle upgrade you didn't take will be called being cheap. The investment you made instead of the vacation will be called overthinking it. The evening you spent reading about asset allocation instead of going out will be called antisocial. The no you said to the group dinner where everyone splits equally and you'd be funding 3 people's expensive taste will generate friction in the relationship. And you will feel that friction, and it will cost you something real. The 1% are not immune to this. They feel it. The ones who started from nothing feel it the most acutely because the gap between where they came from and where they are building toward is widest. And the people who knew them before the gap opened don't always understand what happened or why you're different now, or why you keep saying no to things you used to say yes to. You are not better than them. You're just playing a longer game, and longer games look strange to people who are playing shorter ones. What keeps you in the longer game is not discipline alone. It is clarity. The number you wrote down was 24. The definition of wealth you built before you pursued it. The coordinate you set so that when someone pulls you off course, you know exactly which direction off course you've drifted, and you can return without drama and without guilt. The clarity is the anchor. Without it, the social pressure wins. With it, the social pressure is just noise. What it actually produces. You are 34. 10 years have passed since you made the decision. Not one dramatic decision. 1,000 small ones compounded. Your brokerage account holds $210,000. Your Roth IRA holds $87,000. You own a duplex with $74,000 in equity that cash flows $520 a month net. Your side business generates $3,400 a month, enough that if your job disappeared tomorrow, you would not panic. You would adjust. You would have time to adjust. That time, that buffer between an event and a crisis, is what you actually bought with 10 years of discipline. Not the numbers, the space the numbers create. Your peers who earn similar salaries in their 20s and spent proportionally more of them have between $40,000 and $80,000 in retirement accounts. The gap between you and them is not explained by income. You know this because you've compared. The gap is explained entirely by the difference in decisions made between 24 and 34, compounded daily, silently, and invisibly, until the distance became too large to attribute to luck. You don't tell them this. There is no version of saying it that doesn't wound something. You just live in the gap and keep building and understand that the building is its own reward, because the alternative, looking back at 44 and seeing the decade you wasted, is the only outcome you were ever actually afraid of. The thing nobody wants to hear. There is no secret. That is the secret. The top 1% in their 20s are not operating on information you don't have access to. They are not smarter than you in any way that matters to this conversation. They are not luckier on average, though some of them are, and luck is real and worth acknowledging even when it isn't the point. What they are is consistent in ways that are boring to describe, difficult to maintain, and completely available to anyone willing to pay the price. The price is not money. The price is the decision made at 24 to play a different game. The decision was made again at 25 when the game was harder than expected. The decision was made again at 27 when a correction made the portfolio look like a mistake. The decision was made again at 29 when the lifestyle pressure peaked and the short game looked more rewarding than the long one. That is the 1%. That is the whole thing. There is nothing else behind the door. Just someone who decided and kept deciding long after the decision stopped feeling exciting and started feeling like just another Tuesday. You can do that. You are already doing it. Just keep going.